My name is Corinne Mathers. And that day, I shouldn't have come. I knew what kind of reception I'd get the moment I stepped into that ballroom. High ceilings dripping with florals, laughter too loud to be real, champagne glasses raised in artificial celebration, my sister Isla's wedding, the grand event my parents wouldn't stop boasting about for months. I was just another shadow among the glitter, barely acknowledged. Corinne! Isla's voice sliced through the crowd. She was radiant in her custom silk gown, eyes bright with victory. Oh, you made it! I was afraid they'd mistake you for catering. The room rippled with soft laughter. Her bridesmaids smirked. Even Mom didn't flinch. I smiled, small, controlled. I didn't answer, just found my seat, the one closest to the kitchen doors, with a view of the waitstaff lining up trays. They thought I'd shrink, like always. Stay silent, eat what I'm given, and pretend it's enough. But here's what they didn't know. Half the people in that ballroom had jobs today because of me. The man Isla just married? His family's legacy nearly collapsed last year, and the person who saved it didn't ask for applause or a seat at the head table. They were looking right at her. And soon, so would everyone else. When I was younger, people used to say Isla and I were like night and day. She sparkled. Even as a kid, she had this way of demanding attention without trying. Teachers adored her, neighbors gushed over her, and our parents, well, they practically revolved around her. Every dance recital, every birthday party, every little trophy she brought home was celebrated like the second coming. Meanwhile, I learned to fold quietly into the background, to be the easy one, the quiet achiever, no fuss. At first, I didn't mind. I thought it was a kind of power. To be unnoticed meant I could make my own choices. So I studied hard, got into finance, earned my degree early, took a job in New York right after graduation. No one in my family asked where I worked or what I did. They just assumed I'd become some kind of accountant. Not that they asked Isla those questions. She was too busy being adored. She went to art school in Milan for 2 years. Dad paid the full tuition and living expenses, called it her creative journey. When I got laid off during the 2009 financial crisis, I called home just to hear a familiar voice. My mother said, "You'll bounce back, just be smart about it," then passed the phone to Isla to tell me about her new gallery boyfriend. The truth is, my family loved the version of me that stayed small. Helpful, quiet, reliable, not the one who challenged anything. Certainly not the one who started her own consulting firm at 32. They never asked how I bought my brownstone, or how I traveled so often without ever posting about it. I think they assumed I was still just scraping by. By the time Isla got engaged, I hadn't seen my parents in nearly 3 years. Her email came on a Tuesday night. No call, just, "Wedding on March 3rd, hope you can make it. Seating details to follow." It wasn't even signed with her name. I almost didn't go, but something pulled at me. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the tiniest flicker of hope that I'd walk in and they'd say, "We were wrong about you." Of course, I should have known better. When I arrived at the venue that morning, early per usual, my mother barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, you're here. The ceremony's at 4. Try not to wear anything too loud," she said. Too loud. I was wearing navy. Then came the rehearsal dinner the night before, where I was seated with Isla's high school friends, people I hadn't spoken to in 2 decades. One of them asked if I was still single, then followed it with, "That's okay. Not everyone needs a partner to be fulfilled, right?" The words were syrupy, but the sting was sharp. I laughed it off. Because what else could I do? In my family, deflection was a form of survival. We didn't fight. We measured. Every comment was a little scale. Who was more successful? Who looked better? Who mattered? And somehow, Isla always came out ahead. But what they didn't see, what they never tried to see, was that while Isla was being adored, I was building something real. Quietly, without applause, without the need for their validation. And a year before her wedding, my work ended up saving the entire foundation of the man she would marry. Of course, she didn't know that. Not yet. A year before Isla's wedding, I received a referral through a discreet channel, a friend of a friend in private equity, who knew my work in corporate restructuring. The message was brief. Family-owned logistics firm. Quiet crisis. NDA required. Discretion above all. That wasn't unusual. I built my reputation on discretion. My firm, Mathers Consulting, specialized in cleaning up financial messes quietly. We didn't put our name on the headlines. We didn't need to. The right people knew where to find us. When the documents arrived, I recognized the name immediately. Whitbridge and Company, one of the oldest privately held shipping companies on the eastern seaboard. Third-generation ownership, billion-dollar assets on paper. But behind the legacy branding was a bloodbath. Over-leveraged assets, mismanaged subsidiaries, 2 lawsuits pending, and a massive debt balloon about to burst. The CEO's name was Malcolm Whitbridge. I didn't know yet that he had a son named Derek, or that Derek had been quietly dating my sister for over a year. Isla hadn't mentioned him, of course. She never talked to me unless she needed something. Malcolm never met with me directly. That was standard. I worked through the firm's CFO and legal counsel, who were scrambling to hold the pieces together. The brief was simple: rework their debt obligations, cut underperforming branches, and prepare for a quiet merger exit if things didn't stabilize in 12 months. The first thing I did was shut down the European branch. It was bleeding cash and propped up by nothing but nostalgia. The second thing I did was restructure their trucking operations into 2 holding companies, separating liabilities from revenue streams. Within 6 months, they were no longer in freefall. At the 9-month mark, Malcolm sent a message to my office through his legal team. Whoever's behind this is damn good. I owe them more than I can say. I didn't reply. That wasn't part of the job. But privately, I began to admire Malcolm's discipline. He listened to recommendations, signed off quickly, didn't throw tantrums the way second-generation heirs often did. There was strength in how he held things together under pressure. I respected that. 3 months before Isla's wedding, the firm had not only stabilized, it had turned a modest profit. The lawsuits were settled, debt refinanced. Malcolm withdrew his name from the merger talks. That was when the invite to the Whitbridge engagement party floated through the family group chat. I recognized the name immediately. Derek Whitbridge, Isla's fiancé. No one in my family made the connection. Why would they? In their eyes, I was still just Corinne. They never bothered to ask where I worked, what I did, who I helped. If Isla had ever asked me about Derek's family business, I might have said something. I might have told her that I knew more about her future father-in-law's financials than she ever would. But she didn't. She just sent the invitation with a peach emoji. I stayed quiet. Not out of pettiness, but because I had long since stopped expecting gratitude from people who only valued what they could see. And besides, I wasn't doing it for them. I took on the Whitbridge job because it was challenging, well compensated, and technically interesting. But somewhere along the way, it also became personal. Not because they were family, but because they weren't. Because Malcolm never once dismissed me. Because even through layers of protocol and legal filter, I could feel the weight of a man trying to protect something built across generations. It mattered to him, so it mattered to me. And that's what made the irony so sharp, that the same family I had quietly rescued was about to become mine by marriage. And not one of them knew I had saved them from collapse. Not yet. The wedding was held at a vineyard estate just outside of Charleston. Stone terraces, white roses everywhere, and servers in black vests moving with silent choreography. It was the kind of venue Isla had pinned to her dream board since she was 16. Lavish, performed, Instagram perfect. I arrived 15 minutes early, as always. The usher squinted at my name, then pointed toward the side entrance. My place card read, Toll, Table 19, Extended Family. I didn't argue, I rarely do. But as I walked past the other tables, full of aunts, uncles, Isla's childhood best friends, I noticed how mine was tucked behind a large potted ficus near the kitchen doors. Typical. When Isla spotted me during cocktail hour, She was already glowing from champagne and compliments. Derek hovered behind her, polite but distant. We exchanged a brief nod. He looked like a man who'd learned how to be agreeable, not how to notice. Isla didn't miss a beat. Well, well, you made it after all. She raised her glass. Was worried you wouldn't recognize the dress code. She was wearing a custom Monique Lhuillier. I wore a navy sheath with sleeves, minimal jewelry, and a low bun. I looked elegant, unapologetic. She saw none of that, just the fact that I wasn't one of them. Her friends giggled, eyes flicking over me, like I was someone who'd wandered in off the staff shuttle. Dinner was served in 5 courses. Between the filet and the chocolate mousse, the toasts began. Dad went first, sharing a story about Isla's 5th birthday and how she'd always been the brightest light in the room. Mom added something about how Isla had never settled and always reached for what she deserved. Then came Isla's best friend, who told a joke about how some people bloom late, but Isla was born in full color. I kept my smile in place, even when the woman turned to me and said, "Corinne, remember when Isla used to dress you up like her assistant? Seems like you've kept the role." Everyone laughed. Even Derek smiled. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. They saw me as nothing. The older sister who never quite made it, who didn't get married, didn't bring a +1, didn't have a spotlight of her own, the invisible one, the utility sibling. And then Isla stood for her own toast. She raised her glass high, her voice bright and clear. "To love," she said. "To new beginnings, and to family, especially those who show up, even if they've been distant." She looked directly at me. "To those who live in shadows," she added, "and somehow still find their way to the light. We're glad you made it, Corinne." "Really?" The air around the table tightened. I felt a slow burn crawl up my throat, but I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just set my glass down and folded my hands in my lap. They were trying to humiliate me. Or maybe they thought they already had. But what Isla didn't know, what none of them knew, was that her new father-in-law had asked for a private meeting earlier that week. He wanted to meet the strategist who had saved his company. I had declined. I told his assistant, "It's not necessary, my work speaks for itself." But now, as Isla finished her toast and the applause began, I saw Malcolm Whitbridge slowly rise from his chair at the head table. He didn't smile. He didn't raise his glass. He cleared his throat once and said, "I'd like to say a few words before dessert." The clinking of silverware stopped. Every head turned, including Isla's. Malcolm Whitbridge was not the kind of man who sought attention. He didn't wear expensive watches or speak in grand metaphors. He was quiet, calculated, and rarely spoke unless he had something worth saying. So when he stood up at that wedding, every conversation died mid-sentence. "I'd like to say a few words." He repeated, eyes fixed on the room, not smiling, not asking permission, just stating it. Derek looked puzzled. Isla froze with her champagne halfway to her mouth. Malcolm didn't raise his glass. He didn't perform. He turned his body slightly, just enough so he was facing me. Then he said, "There's someone here today who doesn't expect to be thanked, who didn't ask for recognition or applause. But without her, I wouldn't be standing here. My family wouldn't be standing here." He paused. The silence in the room was unnatural. Even the waitstaff held still. "This past year," he continued, "my company was on the edge. Most people don't know that, and I preferred it that way. We were weeks away from losing everything my grandfather built. Generations of work, gone." A ripple of confusion passed through the guests. He nodded slowly. But then someone stepped in. A strategist. A ghost in the system, really. She gave us a path through. She never put her name on anything. She never asked to meet me, but she rebuilt the very thing we thought was lost. Another pause. Malcolm's voice was low, but each word hit like a pin dropping in a cathedral. "And tonight, I find myself sitting at her wedding table, watching her be dismissed, minimized, and mocked." He looked directly at Isla, the breath caught in her throat. "That ends now. Then he turned back to me. "Corinne Mathers," he said. "Thank you for saving my company, for saving my family, and for doing it with more grace than I've seen in a lifetime of boardrooms." My hands were still folded. My face was neutral. But inside, something cracked. Not from pain, but from the sheer weight of years lifting off me. Malcolm gave a single nod, then sat down. No toast, no flourish. Just the truth, dropped like a stone into still water. The silence after was almost violent. Derek looked at me, then at his father, clearly realizing something that hadn't fully hit him before. "Isla?" She was pale. All her glow drained into disbelief. For once in her life, she didn't know what to say. My mother cleared her throat and reached for her water glass. My father leaned back slowly, like he wanted to disappear into his chair. No one clapped. Not because they didn't believe it, but because they didn't know how to respond. The shame was thick, not mine, theirs. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I simply picked up my napkin, dabbed the corner of my mouth, and stood. "I think that's my cue," I said quietly, mostly to myself. As I walked past Isla's table, she looked up at me. Eyes glassy, mouth parted. She didn't apologize. Of course she didn't. Isla never did. But her silence spoke louder than anything she'd said all night. When I reached the entryway, Malcolm followed. He didn't say much, just placed a hand gently on my arm and murmured, "You're the kind of person I want my son to admire." Then, softer, "I'm sorry for what you've endured. You deserved better." I nodded once. That was enough. I didn't need the room to applaud. I didn't need to reclaim a chair at a table that was never built for me. Because what they didn't understand, what Isla never could, was that I had never once wanted to belong in that world. I had built my own, and it was stronger than anything they could ever mock. I didn't stay for dessert. The applause died quickly after Malcolm's words, replaced by the kind of silence that only comes when something true has been said in a room full of people who've built their lives on pretending otherwise. I walked out alone, not rushed, not shaken, just steady. The night air was cool, salt-tinged from the nearby coast. I stood by my car for a moment, letting the quiet settle. Inside the venue, the lights were still warm. The music had started back up, and someone was laughing a little too loudly, as if that would erase what had just happened. It wouldn't. I drove back to the inn I'd booked, a small, restored colonial house 10 miles from the venue. No wedding guests, no family, just soft sheets, wooden beams, and the kind of silence you earn. I took off my heels, unpinned my hair, and poured a glass of water, sat by the window, watched the stars blink like they had all the time in the world. I didn't feel triumphant, or smug, or even relieved. I just felt weightless. For years, I'd carried the subtle ache of being the background character in my own family, the one they forgot to introduce, the one they assumed hadn't made it, the one they thought they could joke about because I never corrected them. Tonight, I didn't have to. Someone else did it for me, someone whose voice they couldn't laugh off, and that made all the difference. The next morning, a letter arrived at my office. Handwritten, thick envelope, no return address. I recognized the script. "Malcolm, Corinne," it read. "Your discretion is rare, your integrity rarer. Our family owes you more than we'll ever say aloud. I hope you'll accept this seat at our table, not as repayment, but as recognition." Inside was a card. Board member, Whitbridge Holdings. I smiled. Not because I needed the title, not because it changed anything, but because it proved what I already knew. Some work doesn't need to be witnessed to be real. Some presence speaks louder when it's quiet. I didn't call my parents. I didn't respond to Isla's text. Some half-hearted apology with a crying, laughing emoji, like it had all been a misunderstanding. It hadn't been, and I wasn't interested in making her feel better about it. Instead, I opened the drawer in my desk where I keep my reminders. My first business card, a sticky note with the words, "Stay sharp, stay soft." And now, Malcolm's letter. a private archive of proof. Not that I matter, but that I always did. We live in a world that rewards noise, spotlight, and spectacle. But grace? Grace moves differently. It walks out quietly after dinner, without needing to win. And sometimes that's what real power looks like. Not needing to clap back, not needing to be liked, just being seen, clearly, finally, and knowing you never needed the room's permission to be whole.